I'm Congressman Mark Takano, Chairman of the House Committee on Veterans Affairs, and today I want to talk to you about the Honoring Our PACT Act. The history of our government's response to service members who were exposed to toxic substances has often been slow. A veteran or a service member who's been exposed, they put that burden of proof on the service member. As a consequence, our veterans have had to, out of pocket, pay for the costs to prove that they were exposed to something that was toxic, and to have to connect that exposure to a medical condition that they have. Whether it's a cancer, whether it's respiratory disease, whether it's diabetes, whether it's any number of ailments that show up often years after they served in the military. This history should weigh on all of us as we look to pass legislation called the Honoring Our PACT Act, which is legislation that I'm honored and deeply honored to carry along with many, many co-sponsors. So what will the PACT Act do? The PACT Act will expand healthcare to 3.5 million veterans who've been exposed to toxic substances. We have a section in the bill which concedes exposure to those service members who were serving in a time and place where they were exposed to the smoke coming from these burn pits. We have enough knowledge to be able to give the veterans the benefit of the doubt on certain illnesses that have already arisen within the exposed population. I think most Americans would reasonably conclude that we owe the veteran the benefit of the doubt when such claims arise. And the 23 additional illnesses, predominantly are rare cancers that reasonably could be associated, but not singly connected by the science. The third thing that the PACT Act does is it reforms the whole way in which we establish presumptive conditions. What are presumptive conditions? Conditions that we presume to be connected to a toxic exposure. Often is the case that the Academy of Sciences, National Academy of Sciences, has presented very clear evidence of a service connection or a connection between a condition, a medical condition or an illness, and an exposure. Toxic exposure has effects that manifest often many years after a conflict is over. In the heat of battle, when our attention is focused on our service members, it's all very simple for us to be able to appropriate the funds to take care of our service members in the heat of battle. But you and I, the American people, we have an obligation to help our service members and our veterans years after the heat of battle has passed. Because for our service members, they still are in the heat of battle when they're battling a rare cancer, when they are dealing with high blood pressure or diabetes or Parkinson's disease that's associated with the fact that they were exposed to dangerous chemicals or radiation while they were in uniform. I often like to call this the cost of war. The cost of war continues for many, many of our veterans years after the war has ended.